Hello and welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. Today we're going to be continuing the journey painting the Space Wolf Combat Patrol box that recently got released. Today I'm going to be painting the Intercessors that came with the box. As you can see, I've added a little bit of green stuff, a little bit of fur just around the shoulders just to make them a little bit more wolfy and make them fit into my Red Wolf chapter. Before we get started on the painting though, as usual, let's get that kettle on. So what I'm going to do throughout this video is concentrate on one model so you've got an idea of how to paint a guy, a marine, and then you'll be able to see how I paint the rest as well because they're all done exactly the same. As you can see, I've already done the base. As usual with the Red Wolf chapter, I've gone with a Rhinox hide base with Mournfang dry brush over the top just for the brown areas, and then a Mechanica standard grey, little bit of Dawnstone and a little bit of Celestial Grey just to highlight, all dry brushed on the rocks, so you've got that sort of a grey feeling. It really stands out quite nicely from the base. The base coat has already been done, as you can see, which is Mechanica standard grey, as I've done with the rest of the models. So the first bit of painting we're going to do is dry brushing the actual colour that we want the armour to be. So I've got a little bit of Dawnstone, got my dry brush out. You wipe the majority of the paint off the brush, and then you'll be able to go straight in and cover the whole of the armour essentially, which is what you can see I'm doing here, covering every little bit, left the head and things because obviously that's not armour, we don't need to do that, but all the armour pieces essentially have all been dry brushed. The next step is to shade that, and what I'm doing is using an Agrax Earth shade. Now if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll see that we're sort of following those same sort of steps, and we're covering the complete armour, the whole model essentially, with Agrax Earth shade. So you're adding in the shading straight away, and it also gives this dirty and grimy sort of a feel to the model, and makes it look a little bit more realistic, or on that bright and shiny feel. But then if you want the bright and shiny feel, you can ignore this step, I suppose. That just doesn't feel very wolfy to me though. So the next step is the red in this instance. So we're going with Contrast Blood Angels red just on the right hand shoulder pad, which is sort of the pack marking, or that's where we're going to go with the pack marking. We're going with the red and black for the Intercessors. And I can also pick out some of the wax seals just around the model, and anything else really that you wanted to keep red. But these are these two main areas, I suppose. The next stage is the opposite shoulder pad, and in this time I'm going to be painting it Celestial Grey. Now this is a really sort of light grey, almost dark white colour that makes the Red Wolf transfer that I'm going to be putting on them really pop nicely. It's a really nice white, very sort of 30k-esque. You see a lot of 30k Space Wolves, the Vilkenfenrika, actually having this sort of a colour, and I'm sort of following that theme, I suppose, with them, rather than going with the yellows and things that you see with Ragnar's Great Company and some of the other companies that you've got out there. The next paint I'm going to be using is another contrast paint, which is Black Templar. Essentially this is to pick out all those black areas around the model. So you've got all the vents and things on the backpack, in between all the armour, so you've got the areas where the armour isn't just a plate, it's where it's more manoeuvrable, so all the joints, the weapon itself, so his bolt gun, the casing for that, I've gone with the complete black for the bolt gun, so it's easy and it fits in with the wolf theme as well. The next colour I'm going to be using is another contrast paint, which is Contrast Wildwood. This is a great mid-level brown, and if you wanted to highlight it, it's a great sort of colour to go with, maybe a highlight of Xandri Dust or something similar, but I'm not going to in this instance. I'm just going to stick with the Contrast Wildwood just around the furs. He's got his belt and any other pouches and things like that all around the Intercessors. If he's got a scabbard, I usually stick with the brown for the scabbard as well, just with some of the metal highlights. Okay, so we're now on to the head, which can be quite tricky. I'm going to start with the eyes. I'm going to grab a little bit of Corvus Black and just draw a line where the eye is essentially. And what this does is give you a dark line round where the eyeball will be essentially, and it sort of gives you that natural sort of a shade and makes it pop. I've seen a lot of people do an eyeball straight over on the top of the flesh colour, and I don't think it quite works. The next stage is to grab a little bit of white paint. Any sort of white paint will do. I'm using Corax white. Just essentially draw another line within that black line that we've already drawn or already painted, just from the bridge of the nose across to the edge of the eye. And what this does is essentially give you the look of an eyeball, and it makes the white of the eye pop quite nicely by using this sort of light white colour. The next stage is then to do the actual iris, and to do that I've gone back to the Corvus black, and all I'm doing is touching a little bit of black paint just on the centre of that white line. And what this does is give you the iris quite nicely. If you are going to give this a try, I'd really take your time. Try and just get a small amount of paint on the brush. And that's the eyes done. So then it's onto the actual skin around the face. Now, because I've gone with a grey base coat, the contrast paints aren't really going to work. So what I'm going to do is actually paint the whole of the face now with Corax white, and what this will do is give a really nice light base coat for the contrast paints to work their magic essentially. So we don't have to use any of the base flesh colours, which you can do if you want, but I found this really works, and really works quite nicely with the skin. Now the next stage is obviously the contrast paint over the top of that white area, but really do need to make sure you let the white dry, as it'll mix and start to give you a really weird sort of a colour. Now the base paint I've actually started with is Contrast Gulliman Flesh, and this is a really nice one to start with, and it works really well, and it looks fantastic on the models. Now you can highlight this and darken it down in a few areas if you want to, which I'm actually going to do in a second with Fire Slayer Flesh. Now all I'm doing here with the Fire Slayer Flesh is touching just at the top of the nose, and he's got a scar across his head, and all I'm doing is putting a little tiny bit on there, and what this does is make those areas stand out really nicely. Any of the recessed areas you can actually concentrate around just a little tiny bit of Fire Slayer Flesh, and this looks really effective. Now the next colour, continuing with that head area, is Xandri Dust, and that's just around the beard and his hair essentially. I found that Xandri Dust is a really good base colour for blonde hair. Now a lot of people go towards using the yellows and things, but I think that's really bright. I don't think it gives a natural sort of a dirty blonde look that these guys would have in a battlefield. Maybe it works for elves and things like that, for fantasy ranges, but for me the Xandri Dust is perfect. While I was working around this area, I did notice that the brown around the fur looked a little bit flat, and so I wanted to give it some definition. So I highlighted the essentially the raised areas of the fur with a little bit of dry brushing of Mournfang brown, and this made some of the areas pop quite nicely, and gave you a little bit more definition to the model, because I thought that's the problem with using these contrast paints on the grey. You lose a lot of that really. The next stage is then to the silver around the model. This is mainly around the weapon itself. Within those joints that we were talking about earlier with the armour joints, you've got all the black areas with some little raised areas that could be a little bit silver maybe. So that's what I've gone with, just to give them a little bit of something rather than just being that flat black colour. The around the weapon is really important, and I've also done the belt buckle area as well. I thought that would look quite nice to be that lighter metal as opposed to the brown. Now with this particular Marine, he's got like a mechanical device over his eye, so obviously we went with the silver for that, and all I'm doing here is picking out just the centre area, which is sort of like an eyepiece or a lens, so I'm just putting a little bit of red on there, and that's just Mephiston red that I've been using with some of my other models as well, just a little dot of that, just to make it give it like a little bit of something rather than just leaving it a plain silver. We're then onto the gold areas around the model, and there's quite a lot of gold we're actually putting onto this model, mainly around the chest piece and on each of the shoulder pads, like around each of the pauldrons essentially. I've gone with like this gold look that's a really nice gold. It's Retributor armour. Now it is very bright, but when you put a little bit of Nuln Oil on the top of it, it dulls it down really nicely and give you sort of a burnished sort of gold look, and I really like that on these models. Before we get onto the shading though, what I'm doing here is essentially highlighting the edges of all the panelling with a Administratum grey. This is a really nice grey to go with this one, because it stands out quite nicely, but it's not too bright. You just get the side of the brush essentially, get a little bit of paint on your brush, don't have loads on there, wipe a bit off, just onto your palette, and then just draw it along the edges of the panels, and it looks really effective. And then we're on to actually shading those areas I previously talked about. Now I'm starting with an Agrax Earthshade here, and I'm going over all those areas that I've used Sandry Dust. So we've got some of the parchment and also around the beard, sorry. This works really well with this Sandry Dust, and gives it that real definition, and sinks down into the recesses really nicely. Gives you quite a nice look, or at least I feel that. We're then continuing with that shading with the null oil around all those silver areas that we've painted, and as you'll see, as soon as you get the null oil on there, it starts to give you that really nice sort of darker metal feel. It makes it look more realistic. I find when painting lead belcher on things and just leaving it, it looks a little bit too bright. This straight away gives you that dull feel and drops into all the recesses as well, giving you that natural shade. The next step is pack markings, just on the right hand shoulder pad, and all I'm doing here is drawing an upside down triangle, which is going to be my pack marking for the Intercessors. There's loads of different designs out there. If you search for Space Wolf pack markings, you'll see there's loads of different things you can do. This is the simplest thing I could find for this particular squad, and this is what I was going with. And while I've got the black out, the final step here is just to add a little bit of writing just onto that parchment. And you do need a really fine brush for this. I'm actually using sort of a brush that you use for calligraphy writing, so it's very thin, very small, but this works really well to draw all those little lines, because you can't actually write on them, it's so small, or I can't anyway, but it looks really effective. But that's it, the model is complete. All I've done there is add a little bit of Valhalla Blizzard to the base that you didn't see me do, but you know, anyone can pop a little bit of Valhalla Blizzard around the base to make it look good. But I'm really pleased. I think this is probably one of the best heads I've ever painted, to be honest. And he fits in with the squad really nicely, that you'll see now. It's absolutely fantastic looking squad, fits into the Red Wolf chapter really well, and I'm really pleased with how they've turned out. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I've enjoyed painting it. Make sure you do hit that subscribe button, because there's plenty of content out there. Go and have a look at my other videos as well. There's loads of stuff on the Red Wolves and on painting the Space Wolf chapter. Lots of different things like the dreadnoughts and the vehicles and things. It's all online now. But thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.